The blood-stained snow glistened under the fading winter light as Levi Lawson pulled his horse to an abrupt halt, the animal's breath forming clouds in the frigid air of Challis, Idaho, in December of 1883. What he'd initially thought was a discarded bundle of rags half buried in the snowbank near Pine Creek was unmistakably human, a woman. Barely visible through the swirling flakes, her dark hair a stark contrast against the white landscape. "Whoa, thunder," he murmured to his stallion, quickly dismounting and trudging through the knee-deep snow. The temperature had dropped dramatically in the last hour, and the brewing blizzard promised to be merciless. No living creature could survive a night exposed to such elements. As he approached, Levi's stomach turned at the sight before him. The woman lay crumpled, her dress torn and bloodied, her face barely recognizable beneath purple bruises and dried blood. Someone had beaten her savagely and left her to die in the unforgiving cold. "Madam." He called, kneeling beside her. When she didn't respond, he pressed 2 fingers against her neck, relief washing over him at the faint pulse he found. "Thank God," he breathed. With careful movements, Levi gathered the unconscious woman into his arms, noting how light she felt despite her sodden clothes. He estimated her to be in her early 20s, though it was difficult to tell through the swelling and bruising. "Hang on," he said, though he knew she couldn't hear him. "My cabin's not far." Mounting thunder while holding her securely proved challenging, but Levi managed, keeping the woman cradled against his chest as he urged his horse toward home. The wind howled around them, carrying snow that stung his cheeks and threatened to obscure the path. His cabin sat isolated 3 miles from town, which on any other day would be a short ride. Today, with the blizzard descending and an injured woman in his arms, it felt like an eternity. By the time the dark outline of his cabin appeared through the whiteness, Levi's arms ached, and the woman had grown alarmingly cold. He nudged Thunder forward with renewed urgency. "Almost there," he promised, though his words were lost to the wind. Levi's cabin was modest but sturdy, built by his own hands after arriving in Idaho Territory 4 years prior. After dismounting and carrying the woman to the porch, he managed to open the door while still holding her, then kicked it shut behind them. The warmth inside was immediate, thanks to the banked fire in the stone hearth. Levi gently placed the woman on his bed, then hurried to stoke the flames. Once satisfied with the fire, he returned to assess his unexpected guest. Up close in the flickering light, her injuries looked even worse. Someone had done this deliberately, with hatred behind each blow. Levi's jaw tightened as anger rose within him. He'd seen violence in his years on the frontier, had participated in his share during the war, but attacking a woman this way was unconscionable. "Let's get you warmed up," he said softly, retrieving a basin of water and clean cloths with careful hands. Levi began cleaning the blood from her face, revealing features that, despite the swelling, were delicate and striking. Her dark brown hair, matted with blood and snow, would need attention later. For now, his priority was warming her and tending to her wounds. As he worked, removing her torn outer garments and covering her with thick blankets, he spoke in a low, reassuring voice. He had no way of knowing if she could hear him, but it seemed right to explain what he was doing. "I'm Levi Lawson," he told her. "Found you in the snow on my way back from town. You're safe now. I don't know who did this to you, but they're long gone." The woman's breathing remained shallow but steady as he applied a poultice of herbs to her worst cuts. When he'd done all he could, Levi pulled a chair beside the bed and settled in to wait, wondering who she was and what had brought her to such a state. Outside, the blizzard raged on, enveloping the cabin in a cocoon of white. They were completely isolated now, cut off from town until the storm passed. Levi stoked the fire again, added another blanket over the mysterious woman, and prepared himself for a long night. It was past midnight when she first stirred. Levi, who had dozed off in his chair, awakened instantly at the sound of her soft moan. "Easy now," he said, leaning forward as her eyelids fluttered. When her eyes finally opened, they were a striking shade of green, clouded with pain and confusion. She gasped and tried to sit up, only to fall back with a whimper. "You're safe," Levi assured her quickly. I found you in the snow. You're in my cabin, about 3 miles outside of Challies. The woman's gaze darted around the room, taking in her surroundings before settling back on him. Fear was evident in her expression. Who? Her voice was barely audible, broken from disuse or injury. I'm Levi Lawson. I have a small ranch here. I was returning from town when I found you half buried in a snowbank. He kept his distance, not wanting to frighten her further. Can you tell me your name? She swallowed painfully. Madeline, she whispered. Madeline Turner. Pleased to meet you, Miss Turner, though I wish it were under better circumstances. Levi offered a small smile. Are you thirsty? I have some broth warming. Madeline gave a slight nod, and Levi retrieved a cup of the broth he'd prepared earlier. He helped her sit up slightly, supporting her back with one arm while holding the cup to her lips with his other hand. Small sips, he instructed gently. After she'd taken a few swallows, Levi eased her back against the pillows. Do you remember what happened to you? He asked. Madeline's face tightened and her eyes grew distant. He found me, she murmured, then seemed to catch herself. I can't remember clearly. Levi nodded, recognizing the protective instinct to withhold information. He'd seen it often enough during the war among prisoners. Whatever or whoever had brought her to that snowbank had terrified her, and she wasn't ready to speak of it. That's all right. You've been through an ordeal. Rest is what you need now. He adjusted the blanket over her. You're safe here, Miss Turner. The storm's got us locked in for a day or two at least, but no one will find you. A flicker of relief passed across her face before her eyelids grew heavy again. Thank you, she whispered before drifting back to sleep. Levi watched her for a moment, his mind filled with questions. Who was she running from? What had she done to deserve such brutality? Or more likely, what had someone done to her? He returned to his chair, prepared to keep vigil through the night. Outside, the wind howled like a living thing, rattling the windows in their frames. The blizzard would ensure their isolation for at least another day, maybe longer. Time enough, he hoped, for Madeline Turner to heal enough to tell her story and for him to figure out how to help her. Morning brought no respite from the storm. If anything, the blizzard had intensified overnight, blanketing the cabin in a silence broken only by the crackling fire and Madeline's occasional murmurs as she slept fitfully. Levi moved quietly about the cabin, preparing breakfast and checking on his patient periodically. Her fever had risen during the night, concerning him greatly. Without access to a doctor, he relied on his limited knowledge of treating ailments, gained during his time in the army and years spent on the frontier. He dampened a cloth in cool water and placed it gently on Madeline's forehead. Her eyelids fluttered at the contact. You're burning up, he told her when her eyes finally opened. Try to drink some water. Madeline complied weakly, managing a few sips before turning her head away. Where am I? She asked, her voice slightly stronger than the previous night but still fraught with confusion. My cabin outside Challies, Levi reminded her patiently. I'm Levi Lawson, found you in the snow yesterday. Recognition dawned slowly in her eyes. Yes, I remember now, you helped me. That's right, he offered a reassuring smile. How are you feeling? Like I've been trampled by a herd of horses, she admitted, wincing as she tried to shift position. Careful now, Levi cautioned. You've got some nasty bruises and possibly broken ribs, best to move as little as possible. Madeline nodded slightly, then her eyes widened in sudden alarm. My bag, she gasped. Did you find a bag near me, a small carpet bag with a broken handle? Levi shook his head. No bag, just you. Was there something important in it? Everything I own, she whispered, closing her eyes briefly as despair washed over her features. What little that was. I'm sorry, Levi said sincerely. Once the storm breaks, I could ride back and look for it. No, Madeline replied quickly. No, it doesn't matter now. She attempted a smile that didn't reach her eyes. Thank you for taking me in, Mr. Lawson. Levi, please. He stood and moved toward the stove. I've got some porridge if you think you can manage it. While he prepared a small bowl for her, Levi observed Madeline from the corner of his eye. Despite her injuries, he could see she was a beautiful woman. Her dark brown hair, though still matted in places, framed a face that, underneath the bruising, had fine features and expressive eyes. But there was something in those eyes that spoke of hardship beyond her current injuries, a wariness that came from deeper wounds. When he returned with the porridge, he helped her sit up against the pillows, noting her sharp intake of breath as pain lanced through her. "Broken ribs, I'd wager," he said, steadying her. "We'll need to wrap them once you're a bit stronger." "You seem knowledgeable about injuries," Madeline observed, cautiously accepting a small spoonful of porridge. "Served in the war," Levi explained. "Saw my share of wounded men. Learned to patch them up when no doctor was around." "Which side?" she asked, her tone neutral. "Union," he replied. "Joined up in '62 when I was 18, spent 3 years fighting before heading west." Madeline nodded, taking another careful bite before asking, "Have you been in Idaho long?" 4 years now, came out after trying my hand at several things back east. None suited me." Levi settled back in his chair. "The open country called to me, worked on cattle drives for a spell, then for a rancher near Boise before saving enough to claim my own piece of land." "It's peaceful here," Madeline observed, gazing toward the window where snow continued to fall heavily. Levi chuckled. "When it's not trying to bury us alive, yes. The winters are harsh, but the land is good. I've got a small herd of cattle and horses, nothing fancy, but it's mine." He paused, watching her. "What about you? What brings you to Challies?" The question seemed to shatter the momentary calm. Madeline's hands trembled, nearly spilling the porridge. "I'm sorry," Levi said quickly, taking the bowl from her. "You don't have to talk about it if you don't want to." "No, it's—" Madeline took a shaky breath. "I was passing through, on my way to Oregon. My cousin lives in Portland." Levi nodded, sensing there was much more to the story but unwilling to press. "Well, you're welcome to stay here until you're healed up. Then if you still want to head to Oregon, I can help you arrange passage when the road's clear." "You're very kind," Madeline murmured, her eyes growing heavy again. "Why would you help a stranger this way?" Levi considered the question seriously. "Out here, we look after each other. Have to. The land doesn't forgive those who turn their backs on folks in need." A small smile touched Madeline's lips before she drifted back to sleep, leaving Levi to wonder about the circumstances that had led her to his door. Whatever her secrets, he found himself increasingly determined to help her not just to heal physically, but to escape whatever danger clearly pursued her. The next 2 days passed in a similar pattern. The blizzard continued unabated, keeping them confined to the cabin's warmth. Madeline's fever broke on the second night, much to Levi's relief. Her strength returned gradually, allowing her to sit up for longer periods and take meals at the small table near the fire. On the third morning, Levi awakened to find Madeline already up, standing by the window watching the snow, which had finally begun to lighten. "You should be resting," he admonished gently, though he was pleased to see her improved enough to stand. Madeline turned, and for the first time since her arrival, she offered a genuine smile. The bruises on her face had begun to fade to yellowish green, and though she still moved gingerly because of her ribs, the improvement was remarkable. "I've rested enough," she said. "I thought perhaps I could help with breakfast. It's the least I can do after you've cared for me." Levi stepped closer, noting how the morning light illuminated her features. Even with the healing bruises, he found himself struck by her quiet beauty. "How about we make it together?" he suggested. "I'm not much of a cook, but I manage not to poison myself most days." Madeline laughed softly, then winced, one hand going to her side. "I'll have to remember not to laugh for a while." "Sorry about that," Levi said, smiling apologetically. "Come on, I've got some eggs and bacon." "Nothing fancy, but it'll stick to your ribs." He paused, grimacing at his choice of words. "Poor choice of expression, given your condition." This time Madeline's laugh was careful, controlled. "I understand what you meant." They worked together in comfortable silence, Madeline handling the simpler tasks while Levi managed the heavier cooking. As they ate, he noticed her growing more relaxed in his presence, the wariness in her eyes receding somewhat. "Storm's finally letting up," he commented, nodding toward the window. "Another day and I should be able to get into town for supplies. We're running low on a few things." Madeline's fork paused halfway to her mouth. Will you tell anyone about me?" Levi studied her face, recognizing the fear behind the question. Not if you don't want me to, he answered carefully, though the doctor might be good to consult about your ribs. No, Madeline said firmly, no doctor. At his concerned look, she added more softly, please, Levi. I'm healing fine under your care. All right, he agreed, but I'd like to understand why you're so afraid. Someone hurt you badly, left you to die in that snowbank. Shouldn't they answer for that? Madeline set down her fork, appetite gone. It's complicated. I've got time, Levi said gently. She remained silent for so long that he thought she wouldn't answer. Finally, she spoke, her voice barely above a whisper. I was married, she began, her fingers twisting together in her lap. His name was Victor. He was charming when we first met. I was young, just 18, and flattered by his attention. We married quickly, too quickly. Levi remained silent, giving her space to continue at her own pace. He changed after the wedding, became possessive, jealous, then violent. Madeline's voice grew distant, as though she were recalling events that happened to someone else. The first time he hit me, he apologized for days, promised it would never happen again. I believed him. But it did happen again, Levi surmised quietly. Madeline nodded. Many times. Each worse than the last. I tried to leave once 2 years ago. He found me, dragged me back, said if I ever tried again, he'd kill me. Is that what happened? You tried to leave again? Yes, Madeline's hands trembled. 3 months ago, Victor was arrested for shooting a man in a drunken argument. While he was in jail awaiting trial, I gathered what little money I had saved and fled. I've been traveling west since then, taking odd jobs where I could find them. I thought I was safe, that he couldn't follow me with the law keeping him. But he did, Levi concluded, anger stirring within him at the thought of this Victor and what he'd done. He found me in Challies 2 days before you found me, Madeline's voice cracked. I'd taken a job as a waitress at the hotel dining room. I was serving breakfast when he walked in. I ran out the back, but he caught up to me that evening as I was leaving my rented room with my bag. Levi could fill in the rest the beating, being left in the snow to die. No wonder she was terrified of anyone in town learning her whereabouts. Does he think you're dead? Levi asked. I don't know, Madeline admitted. He was so angry I lost consciousness before. She couldn't finish the sentence. Levi reached across the table, offering his hand. After a moment's hesitation, Madeline placed her smaller hand in his. You're safe here, he promised, and if Victor is still in the area, I'll deal with him. You don't understand, Madeline said urgently. He's dangerous. He's killed before. That's why I need to leave as soon as possible, get to Oregon where he won't find me. Levi squeezed her hand gently. I understand better than you might think. I've faced dangerous men before, but I won't force you to stay if you truly believe leaving is safer. He paused. Though traveling alone in this weather in your condition might be just as dangerous. Madeline withdrew her hand slowly. What would you suggest? Stay here until you're fully healed, Levi proposed. It's isolated enough that no one from town comes out this way, especially not in winter. Once you're stronger and the worst of the snow has passed, I'll take you to the stage stop in Salmon. It's the next town over, about 30 miles. Victor wouldn't think to look for you there. Madeline considered his offer, clearly weighing her options. You would do that for me, a stranger. You're not exactly a stranger anymore, Levi pointed out with a small smile. Besides, what kind of man would I be if I sent you off half-healed into the winter with a dangerous husband on your trail? For the first time, a ghost of a smile touched Madeline's lips. Thank you, Levi. I accept your offer, though I insist on earning my keep while I'm here. Fair enough, Levi agreed, though there's not much to do while we're snowed in. I can cook better than you, Madeline said, her smile growing more confident. And mend, I noticed your shirts could use some attention. Levi laughed, pleased to see this glimpse of spirit from her. I won't argue with that. My cooking's limited and my mending's worse. Then we have an arrangement, Madeline declared, picking up her fork again and resuming her meal with more enthusiasm. Levi watched her, aware of a growing protectiveness he hadn't felt in years. Madeline Turner was more than just a woman he'd rescued from the snow. She was someone who'd endured far worse than the physical injuries that marked her. And somehow, in just these few days, she'd begun to matter to him in ways he hadn't anticipated. The storm finally broke the following day. leaving behind a transformed landscape of pristine white broken only by the dark silhouettes of pine trees. The sky cleared to a crisp, brilliant blue that promised bitter cold but clear travel. "I'll need to check on the livestock," Levi told Madeline after breakfast. "They're sheltered in the barn, but they'll need fresh water and feed after being cooped up during the storm. May I come with you?" Madeline asked, surprising him. "I'd like some fresh air, and I promise not to overexert myself." Levi hesitated, concerned about her still healing injuries. "It's mighty cold out there." "I'll bundle up," she promised. "Please, the cabin walls are starting to close in on me." Unable to resist her pleading look, Levi nodded. "All right, but you tell me the moment you feel tired or cold." He helped her into one of his spare coats, which engulfed her smaller frame, and wrapped a thick wool scarf around her neck. Her own boots had been ruined, so he found her an old pair of his that she stuffed with rags to make them fit somewhat better. Outside, the cold air hit them like a physical force, snatching the breath from their lungs. The snow reached past Levi's knees in places, making the short walk to the barn challenging. Without comment, he offered his arm to Madeline, who accepted gratefully, leaning on his strength as they navigated the deep snow. The barn welcomed them with relative warmth and the familiar smells of hay and animals. Levi's small herd of cattle, just 12 head, lowed softly in greeting, while his 3 horses nickered from their stalls. "They're beautiful," Madeline said, admiring the horses as Levi closed the barn door behind them. "That's Thunder, my gelding," Levi said, pointing to the large black horse who approached the stall door hopefully. "The chestnut mare is Penny and the young bay is Drummer Boy. I'm training him to replace Thunder eventually, though Thunder hates to admit he's getting older." As if understanding, Thunder snorted and tossed his head, making Madeline laugh. "May I?" she asked, gesturing toward the horses. "Of course," Levi nodded, watching as she approached Thunder's stall cautiously. The big gelding regarded her with intelligent eyes before stretching his neck over the stall door to sniff at her. Madeline remained still, allowing the horse to investigate her. After a moment, Thunder nudged her gently with his nose, and she smiled, reaching up to stroke his forehead. "You're good with horses," Levi observed, impressed by her calm approach. "My father raised them," Madeline explained, a wistful note entering her voice. "Before he died, I helped with the gentling of the young ones. He always said I had a way with them." He was right, Levi agreed, seeing how even the usually skittish Drummer Boy was stretching to see the newcomer. "What happened to your father's horses after he passed?" A shadow crossed Madeline's face. "Victor sold them, said they were a waste of time and money. That was the first sign I should have heeded, but I was too blinded by grief over father's death to see it clearly." Levi felt a surge of anger toward this unseen man who had caused Madeline so much pain. "Some men don't understand the value of things that can't be measured in dollars," he said quietly. Madeline nodded, continuing to stroke Thunder's forehead. "My father would have liked you," she said unexpectedly. "He valued honesty and kindness above all else." The simple compliment warmed Levi more than it should have. "He sounds like a wise man." He was. Madeline stepped back from Thunder reluctantly. "I'll let you tend to your chores now. Is there something I can help with?" Levi considered. "You could fill the water buckets for the horses while I fork hay to the cattle. The pump is there by the wall. It might be a bit stiff from the cold." They worked together companionably, Levi keeping a watchful eye on Madeline to ensure she didn't strain her healing ribs. Despite her injuries, she moved with quiet efficiency, speaking softly to each horse as she refreshed their water. By the time they finished, color had returned to Madeline's cheeks, and though she was clearly tiring, her eyes were brighter than he'd seen them yet. "Thank you for letting me help," she said as they prepared to head back to the cabin. "You're welcome anytime," Levi responded. "The animals seem to like you." The trek back through the snow was more difficult, and by the time they reached the cabin, Madeline was leaning heavily on Levi's arm, her breathing labored. "I overdid it," she admitted as he helped her inside and over to a chair by the fire. "Rest now," he advised, removing her borrowed boots and coat. "I'll make some coffee to warm us up." As he busied himself at the stove, Levi found himself stealing glances at Madeline. Something had shifted between them during their time in the barn, a comfortable companionship that felt surprisingly natural. He'd been alone for so long that he'd almost forgotten what it was like to share simple tasks with another person. "I should head into town tomorrow," he said as he handed her a steaming cup of coffee. "We're low on supplies and I need to check for mail. Will you be all right here alone for a few hours?" Madeline nodded. "Of course, I'll be fine." She hesitated, then added, Would you be willing to inquire if anyone's asking about me? Discreetly, I mean." "I can do that," Levi assured her. "I'll be careful not to raise suspicions." "Thank you." Madeline sipped her coffee thoughtfully. "Levi, I want you to know how grateful I am. Not just for saving my life, but for believing me. About Victor, I mean, many people, they don't understand why a woman stays with a man who hurts her." "I've seen enough of the world to know that things aren't always simple," Levi replied. "Fear is a powerful chain. So is hope, the hope that things will change back to the way they once were." Madeline studied him over the rim of her cup. "You speak as though from experience." Levi stared into the fire, memories surfacing that he usually kept buried. Not the same kind, but similar enough. "My mother stayed with my father despite his drinking and rages. She always believed he would return to the kind man she'd married." He shrugged. "He never did, drank himself to death when I was 16. "I'm sorry," Madeline said softly. "It was a long time ago." Levi smiled faintly. "But I learned from it, promised myself I'd never be like him, that I'd never trap anyone the way he trapped my mother." "Is that why you live alone out here?" Madeline asked, her perception cutting straight to a truth he rarely acknowledged. Levi considered her question. "Partly, I suppose. Though mostly it's just the way things worked out. After the war, I couldn't settle back into town life, needed space, silence." He gestured around them. "Found it here." "It's peaceful," Madeline agreed. "Beautiful in its way. It suits me." Levi finished his coffee and stood. "I should check the woodpile, make sure we have enough split for the night. The temperature's dropping again." As he donned his coat, he was acutely aware of Madeline watching him, her green eyes thoughtful. For the first time in years, Levi found himself wondering what another person truly thought of him and why her opinions suddenly mattered so much. The next morning dawned clear and brutally cold. Levi prepared for his trip into town, layering clothing and checking that his pistol was loaded and functioning smoothly, a habit from his years on the frontier, where preparedness often meant survival. "I should be back by mid-afternoon," he told Madeline, who was preparing a basket of food for him to take. "Keep the door barred while I'm gone, and there's a rifle above the mantel if you need it." "I know how to shoot," Madeline assured him, handing him the basket. "My father taught me." Another thing Victor hated said women had no business handling firearms. "Sounds like Victor and I would disagree on most things," Levi remarked dryly, pulling on his heavy gloves. Madeline stepped closer, adjusting his scarf with a touch that seemed unconsciously intimate. "Be careful," she said quietly. "The road might still have drifts." "I will." Levi found himself reluctant to leave, which was unusual. He'd always valued his independence, the freedom to come and go as he pleased. Yet now, the thought of leaving Madeline alone, even for a few hours, unsettled him. "Bar the door behind me," he reminded her before stepping out into the biting cold. Thunder was eager to be out after days confined to the barn, prancing and blowing steam as Levi mounted. The ride to town would take nearly an hour in these conditions, following the road that wound along Pine Creek before reaching Challies. The small mining town had sprung up after silver was discovered in the nearby mountains in the late 1870s. Now, in 1883, it boasted several hundred residents, a main street with basic businesses, and the ever-present saloons that characterized frontier settlements. Levi rarely visited except for necessities, preferring the solitude of his cabin to the bustle of town. As he rode, Levi considered what to do about Madeline's situation. Her fear of her husband was clearly justified, but hiding forever wasn't a solution. If this Victor was still in the area searching for her, he would eventually hear rumors, ask questions. In a small community like Challies, Secrets rarely remained secret for long. Levi reached town just before noon, the streets relatively quiet as most residents remained indoors against the cold. He tied Thunder outside the general store and stamped his feet to restore circulation before entering. Levi Lawson, Harold Bennett, the storekeeper, greeted him with surprise. "Thought you might have been buried alive out at your place during that blizzard." "Nearly was," Levi replied with an easy smile, removing his gloves. "Need to restock after being snowed in." As he moved through the store selecting items flour, coffee, sugar, bacon, and other essentials, Levi listened to Harold's chatter, keeping his questions casual. "Any excitement in town while I was snowed in?" he asked, examining a bolt of fabric and thinking of Madeline's torn dress. "Not much," Harold answered, leaning against the counter. "Storm kept most folks indoors, though there was a stranger asking questions few days back. Right unfriendly sort, looking for his wife," he said. Levi's hand stilled momentarily on the fabric. "Oh, that's so? Harold nodded. "Claimed she'd run off with their savings. Dark-haired woman," he said. "Pretty but deceitful as a snake, his words, not mine. Doesn't sound like a happy marriage," Levi commented, carefully keeping his tone neutral. "That's what Sheriff Palmer thought too," Harold agreed. "Especially when the fellow showed up with bruised knuckles and blood on his coat. Sheriff questioned him pretty close about it, but the man claimed he'd been in a fight with another traveler over a card game. Sheriff believed him." Levi selected the fabric, a soft blue cotton that he thought would suit Madeline, and added it to his growing pile of goods. "Can't say. But the man left town the next morning, headed north, they say. Good riddance, if you ask me, had mean eyes." Harold began tallying Levi's purchases. "What's with the fabric? Taking up sewing in your old age?" Levi chuckled, offering the explanation he'd prepared. "Tore my good shirt beyond repair. Thought I'd try my hand at making a new one." Harold looked dubious but didn't question further. "That'll be $7.40 total." After paying and arranging for the goods to be loaded onto Thunder, Levi made his way to the sheriff's office. Tom Palmer had been sheriff of Challies for 5 years and was a fair-minded man who took his duties seriously. "Levi," Palmer greeted him, looking up from paperwork. "What brings you to town?" "Just restocking after the storm," Levi replied, taking the seat opposite the sheriff's desk. "Heard there was some trouble while I was snowed in. Something about a man looking for his wife." Palmer's expression grew serious. "News travels fast." "Yes, had a fellow in here 4 days ago, right before the worst of the blizzard hit. Called himself Victor Turner, said his wife had stolen their savings and run off. Wanted to know if anyone had seen her." Madeline Turner, Victor Turner. The confirmation of her story sent a chill through Levi that had nothing to do with the winter cold. "Did anyone report seeing her?" he asked carefully. Waitress at the hotel dining room mentioned a woman matching the description who'd been working there briefly but disappeared suddenly. Palmer studied Levi with narrowed eyes. "Why the interest, Lawson? Not like you to concern yourself with town gossip." Levi shrugged casually. "Just curious. Man comes to town looking for his runaway wife during a blizzard. It's more excitement than Challies usually sees." Palmer didn't look entirely convinced but continued. "Well, it got more interesting. Turner had blood on his coat and bruised knuckles. Claimed he'd been in a fight over cards, but I had my doubts. Asked around at the saloons, and no one remembered any fights matching his description." "You think he was lying?" "I think he was hunting his wife for reasons other than stolen money," Palmer said bluntly. "Reminded me of men I've known who use their fists freely on those weaker than themselves, but without evidence of a crime or anyone reporting one, I couldn't hold him." "Where is he now?" Levi tried to keep his tone casual, though inside he was calculating what this meant for Madeline's safety. "Left town heading north toward Salmon. Told the livery owner he had information his wife had gone that direction." Palmer leaned forward. "Levi, what's your real interest here? You've never been one for idle conversation." Levi met the sheriff's gaze steadily. "Just being neighborly, Tom. It's a long winter." Palmer held his gaze for a moment before leaning back. "All right, keep your secrets. But if you know something about this situation that I should know, I'd expect you to tell me." "Of course," Levi agreed, standing. "Thanks for the information. I should get back before the light fades." As Levi left the sheriff's office, his mind worked furiously. Victor had headed toward Salmon, the very place he'd suggested taking Madeline when she was ready to travel. They would need a new plan, perhaps head west instead, toward Boise. His final stop was the post office, where a letter from his sister in Pennsylvania awaited him. Tucking it into his coat, Levi mounted Thunder and headed back toward his cabin, pushing the horse a bit faster than was wise in the snowy conditions. The news he carried back to Madeline wasn't good, but at least they knew Victor's movements. Knowledge was power, and right now, it might be their only advantage. Madeline was waiting anxiously by the window when Levi returned, rushing to open the door as he approached with his arms full of supplies. "You were gone longer than expected," she said, helping him unload the packages onto the table. "Had more to do than I anticipated," Levi replied, studying her face before continuing. "Your husband was in Challis, Madeline, 4 days ago, right before the blizzard." The color drained from Madeline's face and she gripped the back of a chair for support. He's gone now. According to the sheriff, he left town heading north toward Salmon. Levi helped her to sit as her legs seemed to weaken. "He told people you'd stolen money from him and run away." "That's a lie," Madeline whispered fiercely. "I took only what was rightfully mine, the small inheritance my father left me that Victor hadn't managed to spend yet." "I believe you," Levi assured her. "And I think Sheriff Palmer had his doubts about Victor's story too." He noticed the blood on Victor's coat and his bruised knuckles. Madeline closed her eyes briefly. "My blood," she confirmed softly. Levi knelt beside her chair, taking her trembling hands in his. "Listen to me, Madeline. He thinks you're in Salmon or heading that way. That gives us an advantage. When you're strong enough to travel, we'll head in a different direction." Madeline's eyes flew open, surprise evident in their green depths. "I won't send you off alone," Levi said firmly. "Not with him hunting you. I'll take you to Boise when you're ready. It's a larger city, easier to disappear in, and from there you can make your way to Oregon if you still want to." "Why would you do this?" Madeline asked, searching his face. "You've already done more than most would." Levi hesitated, unsure himself of the full answer. "Because it's the right thing to do," he said finally. "And because—" He paused, then continued more softly, "because in these few days I've come to care what happens to you." The admission hung between them, more revealing than he'd intended. Madeline's eyes widened slightly, and for a moment, Levi feared he'd overstepped. Then her fingers tightened around his. "Thank you," she whispered. "I don't know what I've done to deserve such kindness, but I'm grateful for it and for you." Something shifted in that moment, a subtle change in the air between them. Levi was acutely aware of how close they were, of the warmth of her hands in his, of the way the fading light from the window caught in her hair. With reluctance, he released her hands and stood. "I should unpack these supplies," he said, his voice rougher than usual. "Oh, and I brought you this." He retrieved the blue fabric from one of the packages. "Thought you might be able to make yourself a new dress. Your old one was beyond saving." Madeline accepted the fabric, running her fingers over it with obvious pleasure. "It's beautiful, thank you." She looked up at him with a smile that transformed her face, making her look younger, unburdened. "I'll start on it tomorrow if I may use your sewing kit, of course." Levi busied himself with the supplies, needing the distraction. "I also got news that the stage will start running again next week if the weather holds. We could leave then, if you feel strong enough." Madeline nodded, still stroking the fabric. The pain is less each day." As they settled into their evening routine, Madeline cooking while Levi tended to outside chores, he found himself watching her more than was proper. The way she moved about the small kitchen with growing confidence, the gentle humming under her breath as she worked, the occasional smile she cast his way when she caught him looking. It was dangerous, these growing feelings. Madeline was vulnerable, dependent on his help, and still legally bound to another man, no matter how monstrous that man might be. Levi had no right to think of her as anything more than someone under his protection. Yet that night, as they sat by the fire after dinner, Madeline working on mending one of his shirts while he read aloud from a dog-eared copy of the Odyssey, Levi found it increasingly difficult to remember those cautions. In the firelight, with her hair loose around her shoulders and her expression peaceful, Madeline looked as though she belonged there in his cabin in his life. It was an illusion, he reminded himself sternly. Once she was safe from Victor, she would continue on to Oregon, to her cousin, to build a new life far from the memories of pain. And he would return to his solitary existence, perhaps a little emptier for having known briefly what it was to have her presence brighten his days. The week passed with surprising swiftness. Madeline grew stronger daily, the bruises on her face fading to pale yellows and greens that would soon disappear entirely. Her ribs remained tender but allowed for more movement without pain, and her spirits lifted with her physical healing. She worked diligently on transforming the blue fabric into a simple but elegant dress, her skilled fingers creating something far finer than anything the general store in Challies could offer. Levi found excuses to watch her work, admiring the concentration in her expression as she measured and cut and sewed. For his part, Levi kept busy with ranch chores, repairing fences damaged by the heavy snow and tending to his small herd. Yet always, his thoughts circled back to Madeline and the approaching day when they would leave for Boise, the day that would mark the beginning of their separation. On the 6th night after his trip to town, they sat together at dinner, the new blue dress completed and worn proudly by its creator. The transformation was remarkable. Dressed in something other than Levi's oversized shirts and trousers, Madeline appeared not as a victim, but as the confident, beautiful woman she must have been before Victor entered her life. "You look beautiful," Levi said simply, unable to keep the admiration from his voice. Madeline blushed, her fingers smoothing the fabric self-consciously. "Thank you. It feels good to wear something that fits properly again." "Blue suits you," he observed, "brings out the color of your eyes." Her blush deepened and she ducked her head slightly before meeting his gaze. "Levi, I've been thinking about our plan." "Oh," he set down his fork, giving her his full attention. "Going to Boise makes sense," Madeline began carefully. "But I wonder if perhaps I should make the journey alone after all. You've already done so much, and I hate to take you away from your ranch for so long." Levi frowned. "It's not safe, Madeline. Victor could be anywhere, and if he's determined to find you, he thinks I'm heading to Salmon," she interrupted. "And surely he believes I perished in the blizzard by now. No one could have survived a night in that cold without shelter." "It's too great a risk," Levi insisted. "I've already arranged for my neighbor Jim Taylor to keep an eye on the livestock while I'm gone. It's settled." Madeline studied him for a moment. "There's another reason I think I should go alone," she said quietly. "These past days. They've been unlike anything I've known since before my marriage, peaceful, safe." She took a deep breath. "I find myself growing attached to this place, to this life, to you." The admission hung between them, bold in its honesty. Levi's heart quickened at her words, even as caution whispered in his mind. "Madeline, please let me finish," she said, her voice gaining strength. "I know it's foolish, we barely know each other. And I'm still legally bound to Victor, though in my heart I consider those vows broken beyond repair. But I fear that if you accompany me to Boise, it will be even harder to part ways when the time comes." Levi sat very still, weighing his response carefully. "What if I don't want to part ways?" He asked finally, his voice low and serious. Madeline's eyes widened. "What are you saying?" "I'm saying that I, too, have grown attached," Levi admitted. "More than is wise, perhaps, more than is proper, given your situation, but I can't deny it any more than I can deny the sunrise." He reached across the table, offering his hand. "I don't know what the future holds, Madeline. I don't know if there's a place in it for whatever this is between us, but I do know that I want to see you safe, not just from Victor, but in a life where you can be happy again." Madeline placed her hand in his, her touch gentle but assured. "I've been thinking about that too, about what makes a life worth living." She met his gaze steadily. "Victor took so much from me, my confidence, my sense of safety, years of my life. I don't want to give him one day more by living in fear." "What do you want?" Levi asked. "Peace," she answered immediately. "Work that matters, beauty." Her fingers tightened around his. And eventually, when I'm free of Victor legally as well as in my heart, love with a good man who sees me as an equal, not a possession. The simplicity of her desires touched Levi deeply. Those seem like worthy goals. They do, she agreed. And when I imagine achieving them, when I picture that future. She hesitated, then continued with quiet certainty, I see surroundings very much like this cabin, this land, and a man very much like you. The admission left Levi momentarily speechless. Hope, that most dangerous of emotions, surged within him. Madeline, he began, then paused, choosing his words with care. I won't pretend I haven't thought similar things, but your freedom must come first. Freedom from Victor, freedom to heal, freedom to choose without pressure or obligation. I know, she said softly. And I'm not asking for promises, only acknowledging what exists between us and what might be possible someday. Levi nodded, understanding the wisdom in her words. Then let's start with getting you safely to Boise. Once there, you can send word to your cousin in Oregon, perhaps arrange for her to join you. Idaho territory has divorce laws that favor your situation. Abandonment and cruelty are grounds enough. And after that, Madeline asked, hope tentative in her voice. After that, Levi said, squeezing her hand gently, we see what the future holds. One step at a time. The moment was broken by a sudden pounding on the cabin door, heavy, insistent blows that made both of them jump. Madeline's face drained of color, her hand clutching Levi's in sudden fear. Who could that be? She whispered. Levi stood, placing himself between Madeline and the door. Stay back, he instructed quietly, reaching for the rifle above the mantel. The pounding came again, followed by a slurred voice. Open up, Lawson, I know you're in there, I know you've got her. Victor Turner had found them. Madeline's breath caught in her throat, her entire body going rigid with fear. It's him, she whispered, her voice barely audible. Levi moved swiftly, positioning himself firmly between Madeline and the door. Get to the bedroom, he instructed in a low voice. Lock the door and stay there. No, Madeline replied, surprising him. Though her face was pale, determination had replaced the initial panic in her eyes. I won't hide anymore, he'll just keep finding me. Before Levi could argue, another barrage of pounding rattled the cabin door. I saw the smoke from your chimney, Lawson, Victor shouted, his words slightly slurred. Sheriff in Salmon said you might be harboring her. Open this door before I break it down. Levi hefted the rifle, checking that it was loaded. Stay behind me, he told Madeline firmly. No matter what happens, she nodded, reaching for a heavy iron skillet from the stove and gripping it like a weapon. The sight might have been comical under different circumstances, but Levi recognized the resolve in her stance, a woman done with running, done with fear. Turner. Levi called through the door. This is private property. State your business properly or be on your way. My business is my wife, Victor shouted back. The woman you're hiding, return what's mine and I'll be on my way peaceful like. She's not property to be returned, Levi responded, his voice hard. And she's not going anywhere she doesn't want to go. A harsh laugh came from outside. So she is there, I knew it. There was a pause then. Madeline, get out here now, you've caused enough trouble. Madeline stepped forward, but Levi blocked her with his arm. Don't, he warned. I need to face him, she whispered urgently, or this will never end. Not like this, Levi insisted. Not with him drunk and angry and likely armed. The decision was taken from them as a sudden crash shook the door. Victor had thrown his weight against it. The sturdy pine held, but a second crash splintered the frame. One more such blow would break it open. Levi raised the rifle, aiming at the door. Turner. I'm armed and within my rights to defend my home. Back away now. The only response was a third crash as the door finally gave way, swinging open violently to reveal Victor Turner, a broad-shouldered man with a florid face and wild eyes. In one hand he clutched a revolver, in the other a half-empty bottle of whiskey. There you are, you faithless bitch, he snarled, his gaze finding Madeline behind Levi. His eyes narrowed at the sight of her in the blue dress. All prettied up for your new man, I see. Leave now, Turner, Levi said evenly, the rifle aimed at the intruder's chest. You're trespassing. Victor's bloodshot eyes shifted to Levi. You're the one who's taken what's mine. The law's on my side, Cowboy. She's my wife. A wife you beat and left to die in the snow, Levi replied coldly. The law might recognize your marriage, but no decent man would recognize your right to harm her. Victor's face twisted with rage. You don't know anything about us, about her. She's a liar, a thief. I took only what was mine, Madeline interrupted, her voice surprisingly steady. My father's money that you never had a right to. Shut up. Victor took a step forward, raising his revolver. You're coming with me, Madeline, now. Levi's finger tightened on the rifle's trigger. Not another step, Turner. For a tense moment, the two men stared at each other, weapons raised. Then Victor's eyes flicked to Madeline, and a cruel smile spread across his face. You think he wants you, really wants you, he taunted. Once he knows what you really are, damaged goods, barren as winter soil, he'll tire of you just as quick. Madeline flinched as though struck, but her voice remained firm. That's another of your lies, Victor. The doctor told me it was your seed that was weak, not my womb, but you couldn't bear to think the fault lay with you. Victor's face contorted with fury. Lying whore. He spat, swinging his revolver toward her. Levi fired in the same instant that Victor pulled his trigger. The cabin filled with the deafening reports of both weapons. Levi felt a burning graze along his left arm as Victor's bullet passed him, but his own shot hit true. Victor staggered backward, a bloom of red spreading across his chest, surprise replacing the rage in his expression. You shot me, he gasped, sounding almost bewildered. You gave me no choice, Levi replied grimly, keeping the rifle trained on him. Victor's knees buckled and he collapsed to the porch, the revolver falling from his slack fingers. Blood pooled beneath him, dark against the weathered wood. Madeline moved forward slowly, her face a mask of complex emotions as she looked down at the man who had caused her so much suffering. Is he? Levi lowered the rifle and knelt beside Victor, checking for a pulse. After a moment, he shook his head. He's gone. A small sound escaped Madeline, not quite a sob, not quite a sigh, as she sank down onto a chair. It's over, she whispered. It's finally over. Levi rose, wincing as the movement pulled at his injured arm. Only then did he notice the dark stain spreading on his sleeve. You're hurt, Madeline exclaimed, rushing to his side. Just a graze, Levi assured her, though the burning pain suggested it might be more than that. Madeline helped him remove his shirt, revealing a bloody furrow across his upper arm. Sit, she commanded, her earlier shock replaced by purposeful action. I'll clean and bandage it. As she worked, her hands gentle but efficient, Levi watched her face. Are you all right? He asked softly. Madeline paused, considering the question seriously. I don't know, she admitted. I don't feel what I expected to feel, not joy or relief exactly, just emptiness and perhaps a kind of peace. That's understandable, Levi said. He was your husband despite everything. And no one should rejoice at death, even of an enemy. He wasn't always like this, Madeline said quietly, resuming her treatment of his wound. When we first married, there were moments of kindness, of genuine affection. I've often wondered what changed him, or if that darkness was always there, just hidden. Levi remained silent, letting her work through her thoughts. What happens now? She asked finally, securing the bandage around his arm. I'll ride to town, report what happened to Sheriff Palmer, Levi replied. It was self-defense, clear and simple, he'll understand. Will there be trouble, legal consequences? Levi shook his head. Not likely. He broke into my home armed and threatened both of us. The law is pretty clear about a man's right to defend his home and those in it. Madeline nodded, her gaze drifting to Victor's body on the porch. And him? What happens to him? The sheriff will arrange for proper burial, Levi assured her. Whatever his sins, he was a human being. They sat in silence for a moment, the reality of what had occurred settling around them like dust after a storm. Then Madeline reached for Levi's hand, her touch tentative. Thank you, she said simply, for everything, for my life. Levi turned his hand to clasp hers. You don't need to thank me for that, I do. Her eyes, when they met his, were clear and certain. You saved me twice now, once from the cold and once from him. I won't forget that. Looking into her eyes, Levi saw not just gratitude, but something deeper, a connection forged through shared danger and mutual respect. Whatever the future held, whatever complications Victor's death might bring, He knew with sudden clarity that his life had changed irrevocably since finding Madeline in the snow. "We'll face what comes together," he promised, and was rewarded with a smile that, despite the circumstances, contained the first true hope he'd seen in her expression since their meeting. Sheriff Palmer arrived the following morning, accompanied by his deputy and the town doctor. The night had been long and somber, with Victor's body moved to the barn and covered respectfully until the authorities could collect it. Levi and Madeline had taken turns keeping watch, neither able to sleep with death so close at hand. Palmer listened carefully to their account, taking notes and asking occasional questions. His weathered face remained impassive as Madeline explained her history with Victor, revealing the abuse and her escape. "Mrs. Turner," the sheriff said gently when she'd finished, "I wish you'd felt able to come to me when you first arrived in Challies. Perhaps this could have been avoided." "I was afraid," Madeline admitted. "Victor had friends in law enforcement back east. They always took his side." Palmer nodded grimly. "Unfortunately, that happens too often, but I want you to know that here in Idaho Territory, we take violence against women seriously, especially in domestic situations." While they talked, the doctor examined Levi's arm, pronouncing the wound painful but not dangerous. "Keep it clean and rested," he advised, changing the bandage Madeline had applied. After examining Victor's body and confirming the cause of death, the sheriff made his decision. "Based on the evidence and your statements, this was clearly self-defense." Mr. Turner broke into Mr. Lawson's home armed and with stated intent to do harm. Mr. Lawson acted within his rights to protect himself and Mrs. Turner. Relief washed over Levi. Though he'd been confident of this outcome, the confirmation lifted a weight from his shoulders. "What happens now?" Madeline asked, unconsciously echoing her question from the night before. "We'll take Mr. Turner's body back to town," Palmer explained. "There will be an inquest, but it's a formality in cases like this. You'll both need to sign formal statements, but that can wait a day or two." He hesitated, then added more gently, "Mrs. Turner, as his widow, you'll need to make arrangements for his burial and settle his affairs. Do you have someone who can assist you with that?" The question seemed to catch Madeline off guard. She had been so focused on escaping Victor that she hadn't considered the practicalities that would follow his death. I'm not sure," she began uncertainly. "I'll help," Levi said immediately. "Whatever you need." Madeline gave him a grateful look. "Thank you." After the sheriff, deputy, and doctor departed with Victor's body, the cabin felt strangely empty. Levi busied himself cleaning up the broken door frame, installing a temporary repair until he could properly fix it. Madeline moved about the cabin like a ghost, straightening things that didn't need straightening, her mind clearly elsewhere. Finally, she sat at the table, her hands clasped tightly before her. "I'm a widow," she said, as though testing how the word felt in her mouth. Levi set down his tools and joined her. "Yes, it feels strange to be free of him, yet still connected through death." She looked up at Levi. "Is it wrong that part of me feels relieved?" "No," Levi answered honestly. "He hurt you deeply and repeatedly. It's natural to feel relief that the threat is gone. But I never wanted him dead," she insisted. "Even at his worst, I only wanted to be free of him." "I know that," Levi assured her, covering her clasped hands with his own, "and so does anyone who knows your heart." Madeline turned her hands to hold his. "What do I do now? All my plans were about escaping, about running. I never allowed myself to think beyond that." Levi considered her question carefully. "You have choices now, Madeline, real ones. You can still go to Oregon, to your cousin, if that's what you want, or you can stay in Idaho Territory and build a new life here." "Here," she repeated softly. "In Challies." "Here," Levi confirmed, his meaning clear. "On this ranch, with me, if you want to." Madeline's eyes widened. "Levi, what are you saying exactly?" Levi took a deep breath, realizing he was about to lay his heart bare in a way he never had before. "I'm saying that in the short time I've known you, Madeline Turner, you've become more important to me than I thought possible. I'm saying that the thought of you leaving fills me with an emptiness I can't describe." He squeezed her hands gently. I'm saying that I believe there could be something real and lasting between us if you wanted to see where it might lead. But we barely know each other, Madeline protested, though her eyes betrayed a hope that matched his own. We know enough, Levi argued softly. We know how we respond in crisis. We know we work well together. We know there's a connection between us that's rare and valuable. Madeline didn't deny it. What are you proposing exactly? Stay, Levi said simply. Not as my wife, that would be too soon for both of us, but as my guest, my partner in running this place. Give us time to know each other properly without fear or obligation. And if in time we both feel that what's growing between us is worth building a life around. He left the sentence unfinished, the possibility hanging between them. People would talk, Madeline pointed out. A widow living with a bachelor, unmarried. Let them, Levi shrugged. We'll know the truth of it, and if it bothers you, you could take a room in town and work at the ranch during the days. We'll find a way that respects your reputation and gives us the time we need. Madeline fell silent, considering his words. Levi waited, his heart pounding, aware that he was asking for something unconventional, something that required tremendous trust after all she'd been through. Finally she spoke, her voice soft but certain. I'd like to stay, Levi, here on the ranch with you. Whatever form that needs to take to be proper, we'll figure it out. A small smile touched her lips. I've spent too long worrying about what others think, about fitting into someone else's idea of who I should be. I want to discover who I am now, who I can become. And I want to do that here where I feel safe, valued. Joy surged through Levi, tempered with a deep respect for the courage this decision required of her. We'll take it one day at a time, he promised. No pressure, no expectations beyond what feels right to both of us. One day at a time, Madeline agreed, her smile growing more confident. Starting today. Spring arrived in Challies with a riot of wildflowers and new beginnings. The winter's heavy snows melted away, revealing a landscape transformed by fresh growth and possibility. On the Lawson Ranch, the changes were equally profound, though less visible to casual observers. Madeline had taken a small room above the general store in town, a compromise that preserved her reputation while allowing her to spend her days working alongside Levi on the ranch. The arrangement had raised eyebrows initially, but Sheriff Palmer's quiet support and Madeline's dignified bearing had soon silenced most gossip. 3 months had passed since Victor's death. The inquest had concluded exactly as Sheriff Palmer predicted, a clear case of self-defense. Victor's affairs had been settled, revealing debts Madeline hadn't known about but also confirming her rightful claim to her father's inheritance, which Victor had invested rather than squandered as she'd feared. With those funds secured, Madeline had purchased a half-interest in Levi's ranch, becoming his business partner in truth as well as practice. The legal arrangement gave her independence and security, while their growing personal relationship gave her something she'd thought forever lost: happiness. On a warm May afternoon, Levi found Madeline in the newly planted vegetable garden behind the cabin, her hands deep in the rich soil as she set young tomato plants into neat rows. The blue dress he'd brought her that winter had been replaced by a practical work skirt and blouse, her hair bound in a simple braid that hung down her back. "They're looking good," he commented, admiring both the garden and the woman tending it. Madeline looked up with a smile that still made his heart skip. "They'll do well here, the soil is perfect." Levi knelt beside her, helping to secure a plant that threatened to topple. "Like you," he said quietly, "you've taken root here beautifully." A blush colored Madeline's cheeks, but her smile deepened. "It feels right," she admitted. "Working the land, watching things grow, I never realized how much I missed it until I started doing it again." "Your father would be proud," Levi said, knowing how much her connection to her past meant to her. Madeline nodded, blinking back sudden tears. "I think he would be, not just of the garden, but of everything, of who I'm becoming." They worked in companionable silence for a while, planting the remainder of the seedlings. When they finished, Levi helped Madeline to her feet, using the opportunity to draw her closer than was strictly necessary. "I have something to ask you," he said, suddenly feeling as nervous as a schoolboy. Madeline tilted her head, regarding him with curious eyes. What is it? I know we agreed to take things slowly, Levi began, to give ourselves time to be sure. And I've respected that, haven't I? You have, Madeline confirmed, her expression softening. You've been more patient and understanding than I had any right to expect. Levi took her soil-covered hands in his equally dirty ones, the honest earth binding them together in a way that felt fitting. These past months have been the happiest of my life, Madeline. Watching you heal, seeing your confidence return, working beside you day after day, it's shown me what I want for the rest of my days. Madeline's breath caught, her eyes widening as she realized where his words were leading. I love you, Levi said simply. Not just for your strength or your beauty or your kindness, though those are part of it. I love who you are at your core, a woman who faces life's hardest blows and still finds the courage to plant gardens and dream of harvests. Tears welled in Madeline's eyes, but her smile remained radiant. Levi, let me finish, he requested gently. I'm not asking you to forget what you've been through or to rush into anything that doesn't feel right, but I am asking if you might consider, when you're ready, becoming my wife. He squeezed her hands gently. Not because you need protection or security, you've proven you can create those for yourself, but because I believe we could build something beautiful together, something neither of us could create alone. Madeline stood very still, tears now flowing freely down her cheeks. For a moment, Levi feared he'd misjudged, spoken too soon. Then she freed one hand to touch his face, her fingers leaving a smudge of soil on his cheek. Yes, she whispered. When the harvest comes in, when summer turns to fall, I would be honored to become your wife. Joy surged through Levi, so powerful it left him momentarily speechless. When he found his voice again, it was husky with emotion. You're sure, more sure than I've ever been of anything, Madeline confirmed. I love you, Levi Lawson, not because you saved me, though you did, but because you truly saw me when I was at my lowest, and you helped me remember who I really am. Unable to contain his emotions any longer, Levi drew her into his arms, his lips finding hers in a kiss that held all the promise of their future together. Madeline responded with equal fervor, her arms wrapping around his neck as though she never intended to let go. When they finally parted, both breathless and smiling, Levi rested his forehead against hers. I promise you this, Madeline Turner, soon to be Lawson. Our life won't always be easy, ranching never is, but it will be built on respect and partnership. And I will spend every day making sure you never regret choosing this path. I know you will, Madeline replied with absolute confidence, and I promise to do the same. Around them, the garden stood as testament to their shared labor, rows of green life pushing up from soil that had, just months ago, been frozen and barren. Like Madeline herself, the land had healed with care and patience, revealing a strength that had always existed beneath the surface. As the sun began its descent toward the western mountains, casting golden light across the valley they now shared, Levi and Madeline walked hand in hand back toward the cabin. No longer just a shelter from the storm that had brought them together, it had become the heart of something far more precious, a home built on second chances and the courage to love again. September painted the hills around Challies in hues of gold and amber, the aspens turning their summer greens to brilliant yellow against the evergreen backdrop of pines. The Lawson Ranch buzzed with activity as final preparations were made for the wedding that would take place the following day. In the 5 months since Levi's proposal, Madeline had blossomed fully into the woman she was meant to be, confident, capable, and deeply loved by the community she now called her own. Her room above the general store had been vacated weeks ago, her belongings moved permanently to the ranch house that she and Levi had expanded over the summer, adding a proper second bedroom and a larger kitchen. The night before their wedding found Madeline standing on the porch, watching the sunset paint the sky in colors that rivaled the autumn leaves. She wore a simple dress of harvest gold, her hair loose around her shoulders the way Levi preferred it. There you are, came a familiar voice as Emma Bennett, the storekeeper's wife and Madeline's closest friend in Challies, joined her on the porch. Hiding from all the commotion inside, Madeline smiled. Just taking a moment to breathe, it's been quite a day, indeed it had. Friends and neighbors had been arriving since morning, some to help with wedding preparations, others simply to celebrate. The Bennetts, Sheriff Palmer and his wife, Jim Taylor and his family from the neighboring ranch, and even Madeline's cousin Alice, who had traveled all the way from Portland to stand with her at the ceremony. "Second thoughts?" Emma asked, though her tone suggested she already knew the answer. "Not a single one," Madeline replied truthfully. "I just wanted a quiet moment to appreciate how far I've come, how different things are from a year ago." Emma nodded, understanding in her eyes. Unlike many in town who knew only the sanitized version of Madeline's past, Emma knew the full story of her escape from Victor and the long road to healing she'd traveled. "You deserve every happiness, Madeline," Emma said warmly. "And that man of yours looks at you like you hung the moon and stars." Madeline laughed softly. "The feeling is mutual." "I can see that." Emma bumped Madeline's shoulder playfully. "Now come back inside before your groom sends out a search party. Alice is organizing some ridiculous game that apparently all brides must endure the night before their wedding." Madeline allowed herself to be led back into the cabin, which was crowded with women preparing for the traditional bride's dinner. Levi and the other men had been banished to the barn, where a similar celebration was underway for the groom. Alice, petite and dark-haired like Madeline but with a more exuberant personality, pounced as soon as they entered. "There you are. We're about to start the advice-giving, and you must be properly prepared to receive the wisdom of married ladies." The evening passed in a blur of laughter, good-natured teasing, and genuine wisdom shared by the married women of Challies. Madeline accepted it all with grace, though some of the more intimate suggestions made her blush furiously, much to the delight of her friends. Later, as the women began to disperse to their homes or the rooms they'd take for the night, Alice pulled Madeline aside. "I have something for you," she said, pressing a small package into Madeline's hands. "It's from your mother." Surprised, Madeline carefully unwrapped the package to reveal a delicate silver locket. "Mother's locket," she breathed, recognizing the piece she'd thought lost forever. "How did you get this?" "After you wrote about your escape from Victor, I went to your old house," Alice explained. "The neighbors said he'd left it abandoned when he went searching for you. I managed to salvage a few things before the bank foreclosed." Tears pricked Madeline's eyes as she opened the locket to find miniature portraits of her parents inside. "Thank you," she whispered, embracing her cousin tightly. "This means more than I can say." "Your mother would be so proud of you," Alice said, returning the embrace. "Both your parents would be. You've built a beautiful life here, Madeline, a life worthy of their daughter." The words touched Madeline deeply. For so long, she'd felt she'd failed her parents' expectations, trapped in a marriage that had become a prison. Now, on the eve of beginning a new life with a man who truly honored her, she felt their approval like a blessing. "Will you help me put it on?" she asked, handing the locket to Alice. "I want to wear it tomorrow." As the silver locket settled against her throat, Madeline felt a sense of completion, past and present joining, old wounds finally healing into scars that no longer pained her. Across the yard in the barn, Levi was experiencing his own version of pre-wedding traditions, though the men's celebration involved considerably more whiskey and considerably less decorum. "To Levi Lawson," Sheriff Palmer proposed, raising his glass. The luckiest man in Idaho territory, though he had the good sense not to say so to the lady's face. Good-natured laughter and the clink of glasses followed the toast. Jim Taylor, who had become a close friend over the months, clapped Levi on the shoulder. "Never thought I'd see the day you'd willingly tie yourself to anyone, Lawson. That woman must be something special." "She is," Levi agreed simply, his thoughts with Madeline even amidst the jovial company. Harold Bennett, already pink-cheeked from several toasts, leaned in conspiratorially. "My Emma says Mrs. Turner, soon to be Mrs. Lawson, has transformed the ladies' sewing circle with her city ways. Says she's teaching them embroidery patterns none of them had ever seen before." Levi smiled, knowing how much Madeline enjoyed those weekly gatherings, how important they had been in helping her find her place in the community. "She has many talents," he agreed. Lucky man, Harold repeated, then frowned slightly. Though I still don't understand why you're not having Reverend Phillips perform the ceremony tomorrow. He was mighty put out about being passed over. Levi exchanged a glance with Sheriff Palmer, who knew the full story. Madeline and I preferred a civil ceremony, he explained diplomatically. The judge from Salmon was kind enough to agree to officiate. What he didn't say was that Reverend Phillips had been the one person in Challies who had openly disapproved of Madeline, viewing her as a widow who had moved on too quickly after her husband's death. The fact that Victor had died trying to harm her seemed immaterial to the Reverend's rigid moral code. Sensing the potential for discomfort, Sheriff Palmer deftly changed the subject. Heard you're planning to expand the herd next spring, Levi. Ambitious plans for a newlywed. Grateful for the diversion, Levi launched into a discussion of his and Madeline's plans for the ranch, the additional cattle they hoped to acquire, the new breeding program for the horses, the expanded garden that would provide vegetables for their own use and possibly for sale in town. As the evening wore on and the celebration grew more boisterous, Levi found his thoughts repeatedly returning to Madeline. Even surrounded by friends, he missed her presence beside him, her quiet strength and gentle humor that had become so essential to his happiness. When he finally made his way back to the cabin late that night, the women had departed, leaving only Alice to sleep in the guest room they'd prepared. Madeline herself, following tradition, was staying at the Bennetts' home in town for her last night as a single woman. Levi stood for a long moment in the doorway of their bedroom, which would be truly theirs after tomorrow. On the bedside table sat a small vase with late blooming wildflowers, Madeline's touch, a promise of her imminent permanent presence. With a contented sigh, Levi prepared for bed, his mind full of the woman who had transformed his life in ways he could never have imagined when he'd found her half buried in the snow less than a year ago. Morning dawned clear and bright, the autumn air crisp but not uncomfortably cold, perfect weather for the outdoor ceremony they had planned. Levi was up with the sun, unable to contain his anticipation as he tended to necessary chores before the guests began to arrive. By noon, the ranch was transformed. Benches borrowed from the town hall had been arranged in neat rows beneath the large cottonwood tree near the creek. A simple arch woven with autumn foliage and late-season flowers marked where Levi and Madeline would exchange their vows. Trestle tables laden with food and drink awaited the celebration that would follow. Dressed in his finest clothes, a new black suit ordered specially from Boys, Levi stood beneath the arch with Judge Williamson, trying not to fidget as he waited for his bride to appear. Then, at precisely the appointed hour, a wagon crested the hill from town. Levi's breath caught as he spotted Madeline seated beside Emma Bennett, her wedding dress a soft ivory that glowed in the autumn sunlight. As the wagon drew closer, the small gathering of guests rose to their feet. The women smiled in appreciation of the bride's appearance, while the men nodded approvingly toward Levi. When the wagon stopped at the edge of the gathering, Sheriff Palmer stepped forward to assist Madeline down. In the absence of her father, he had agreed to escort her to her groom, a role he accepted with evident pride. Madeline's dress was simple but elegant, the ivory silk complemented by a crown of autumn flowers woven into her dark hair. Around her neck gleamed the silver locket Alice had given her, a connection to her past as she stepped into her future. As she walked toward him on Sheriff Palmer's arm, Levi found himself unable to look away from her radiant face. Her eyes, fixed on his, held a joy so pure it almost hurt to witness. In that moment, he silently renewed every promise he'd ever made to her to honor her, to cherish her, to build a life worthy of her trust. When she reached him at last, Sheriff Palmer placed her hand in Levi's with a smile and stepped back, his formal role complete. "You're beautiful," Levi whispered, his voice rough with emotion. "So are you," Madeline whispered back, her eyes bright with unshed tears of happiness. Judge Williamson cleared his throat gently, bringing their attention back to the ceremony at hand. "Friends and neighbors," he began, his voice carrying easily across the gathered crowd. We are gathered here today to witness the union of two souls who have found in each other the perfect complement to their own strengths. The ceremony itself was brief but meaningful, with Levi and Madeline exchanging vows they had written themselves. Madeline's voice trembled slightly as she promised to love Levi through all seasons, in abundance and in hardship, with a heart made stronger by knowing yours. Levi, in turn, vowed to love Madeline with reverence for your spirit, gratitude for your trust, and joy in the privilege of walking beside you through all our days. When Judge Williamson pronounced them husband and wife, the cheer that went up from the assembled guests startled birds from nearby trees. Levi gathered Madeline into his arms for a kiss that managed to be both properly restrained for public viewing and deeply expressive of the love that bound them together. The celebration that followed was exactly what they had hoped for, joyful but intimate, filled with good food, music from local fiddle players, and the warm congratulations of friends who had become family. As the afternoon lengthened into evening, lanterns were lit around the yard, creating pools of golden light for dancing. Levi held Madeline close as they swayed to a slow melody, her head resting against his chest. "Happy, Mrs. Lawson," he murmured against her hair. Madeline lifted her face to his, her eyes reflecting the lantern light. "Completely, Mr. Lawson, and you, more than I knew was possible," he admitted, bending to kiss her softly. "I keep thinking about that night I found you in the snow, how close I came to riding past without seeing you." "But you did see me," Madeline reminded him. "When I was nearly invisible, you saw me." "Best thing I ever did," Levi said with simple conviction, as darkness fell fully and the celebration began to wind down. Guests departed with final good wishes for the newlyweds. Alice, who would stay one more night before returning to Portland, tactfully announced she would spend the evening with the Bennetts in town, giving the couple their privacy. Finally alone, Levi and Madeline stood on the porch of their home, his arm around her waist as they watched the last wagon disappear down the road toward town. "Well, wife," Levi said, turning to face her fully, "shall we go inside?" Madeline smiled up at him, love and trust shining in her eyes. "Yes, husband, let's go home." With gentle ceremony, Levi swept her into his arms and carried her across the threshold into their shared future, a future built from the ashes of hardship, nurtured with patience and understanding, and now blossoming into a love neither had dared to hope for when fate first brought them together on a snowy winter night. 5 years later, the spring roundup of 1888 was in full swing at the Lawson Ranch, now one of the more prosperous operations in the Challis area. Levi, astride Thunder's successor, a spirited black gelding named Midnight, directed the Cowboys with the easy authority of an experienced rancher. From the porch of the expanded ranch house, Madeline watched with pride, bouncing their 2-year-old son Thomas on her hip while keeping an eye on their 4-year-old daughter Elizabeth, who was helping one of the ranch hands gather eggs from the henhouse. "Papa," Elizabeth called, spotting her father as he rode toward the house. She abandoned her egg basket and ran across the yard, her dark braids flying behind her. Levi dismounted in one fluid motion, scooping his daughter into his arms with a laugh. "There's my little cowgirl. Have you been good for your mama today?" "Yes, I collected 14 eggs all by myself," Elizabeth reported proudly as Levi carried her toward the porch. 14, that might be a record," Levi said seriously, winking at Madeline over their daughter's head. "And I helped." Thomas declared from Madeline's arms, not to be outdone by his sister. "I'm sure you did, partner," Levi agreed, climbing the porch steps to kiss Madeline in greeting. "Hello, beautiful." "Hello, handsome," Madeline returned with a smile that still made his heart race after 5 years of marriage. "How's the roundup going?" "Right on schedule. Jim Taylor's bringing his crew over tomorrow to help with branding, and we should be finished by the end of the week." Levi shifted Elizabeth to one arm so he could touch Thomas's cheek with his free hand, these two behaving themselves. "As much as can be expected from children who are exactly like their father," Madeline replied with mock severity. "Which is to say, adventurous and occasionally reckless," Levi laughed. "I prefer to think they get their spirit from their mother." Their easy banter was interrupted by the sound of approaching hoofbeats. A rider appeared on the road from town, a young man barely out of his teens who worked for the telegraph office. "Mr. Lawson, Mrs. Lawson," the young man called as he approached. "Got a telegram for you." Levi set Elizabeth down and stepped off the porch to meet the messenger. After a brief exchange and a coin passed for the young man's trouble, he returned to Madeline with the yellow paper in hand. "It's from Alice," he said, unfolding the telegram. His expression brightened as he read. "She's coming to visit, says she'll arrive on next week's stage from Boys with her new husband." "Oh, wonderful," Madeline exclaimed. "The children will be so excited to see their Aunt Alice again." She shifted Thomas to her other hip. "We'll need to prepare the guest room and plan some special meals. I'll have the boys bring in a deer," Levi promised. "And I think there's still some of that blackberry preserve you put up last summer." Their household planning was interrupted by Elizabeth tugging on her father's pant leg. "Papa, can I go back to helping with the eggs now?" Levi crouched down to her level. "Actually, Princess, I was thinking you might want to come with me to check on Penny's new foal. He's starting to get his legs under him." Elizabeth's eyes widened with excitement. "The spotted one." "That's the one," Levi confirmed. "Want to come see?" "Yes, please." Elizabeth bounced on her toes, then looked to her mother for permission. "Go ahead," Madeline nodded, "but listen to your father and stay away from the mare's hooves." "I will." Elizabeth promised. Already pulling Levi toward the barn, Madeline watched them go, her heart full of contentment. From the darkest moment of her life had emerged this happiness. She'd never dared to imagine a loving husband who treated her as an equal partner. 2 beautiful children, a thriving ranch, and respect within the community. Thomas squirmed in her arms, wanting to be put down. "Go see horses too," he demanded. "In a little while, sweetheart," Madeline promised, setting him on the porch where his wooden toys awaited. "Let's let Papa have some time with your sister first." As Thomas settled into play, Madeline leaned against the porch railing, her gaze drifting over the land that had become so much a part of her. The ranch had prospered under their joint care, growing from Levi's modest initial holding to a substantial operation with expanded pastureland, a larger herd of both cattle and horses, and fertile fields that produced hay and vegetables in abundance. But more important than the material success was the life they'd built together, a partnership founded on mutual respect, strengthened through shared challenges, and enriched by the deep love that had grown between them. Later that evening, with the children bathed and tucked into bed with stories and kisses, Madeline and Levi sat together on the porch swing, watching the stars appear in the darkening sky. Her head rested comfortably on his shoulder, his arm around her waist, holding her close. "I was thinking today," Levi said softly, his voice a quiet rumble against her ear, "about how different our lives might have been if that snowstorm hadn't hit when it did." Madeline lifted her head to look at him. "What do you mean?" "If it hadn't snowed that day, I might not have taken that particular route home," Levi explained, "or if Victor had left you somewhere else." He shook his head, unwilling to complete the thought. "You can't think that way," Madeline said gently, placing her hand against his cheek. "What matters is what did happen, not what might have been." Levi turned his head to kiss her palm. "You're right, as usual. It just struck me today, watching you with the children, how much my life would have lacked if we hadn't found each other." "Mine too," Madeline acknowledged softly. "Though I like to think our paths might have crossed eventually, even without the snowstorm." "You think so?" Levi asked, intrigued by the idea. Madeline nodded. "I was heading west, determined to make a new life. You were here, building something beautiful. Perhaps we would have met at a town social, or I might have applied to be a teacher at the school in Challies." Levi smiled at the possibilities. "I'd like to think you're right, that some things are meant to be, regardless of the particular path taken." "I believe they are," Madeline said with quiet certainty. "But I'm still grateful for the path we did take, difficult as parts of it were. It made us who we are together." Levi tightened his arm around her, drawing her closer into his embrace. "And who we are together is pretty wonderful, Mrs. Lawson?" "Indeed it is, Mr. Lawson," Madeline agreed, tilting her face up for his kiss. As their lips met beneath the vast Idaho sky, the ranch settled into the peaceful rhythms of nightfall around them. In the barn, horses shifted and sighed in their stalls. In the children's room, Elizabeth and Thomas dreamed innocent dreams of tomorrow's adventures. And on the porch of the home they'd built together, Levi and Madeline Lawson renewed the love that had begun on a winter day, when compassion led a lone cowboy to look more closely at what appeared to be nothing more than a snow-covered bundle beside the trail. From that moment of human kindness had blossomed a love story that would continue to unfold through all the seasons of their lives, a testament to the resilience of the human heart and its capacity to heal, to hope, and to love again even after the darkest of winters.